for criminal aliens. Zero, zero.
Donald Trump speaks out on illegal immigration. How would his immigration policy affect South Florida?
Patrick Murphy is nothing more than an old-fashioned liberal, and his ideas that he stands for are wrong for Florida. They're dangerous, and they will leave us vulnerable.
Marco Rubio on immediate offense against his Democratic opponent for his Senate seat after an easy victory in his own GOP primary.
This is the first time that we see actually mosquitoes infected with Zika, but it's not something that was unexpected.
Not unexpected, perhaps, but still unsettling to find Zika-carrying mosquitoes on Miami Beach. We will take it to the round table.
And so much more. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on this Labor Day weekend.
We are glad you're here. We have got some good stuff for you today, starting with a hot topic in this campaign season, immigration reform. Donald Trump gave a much anticipated speech this week explaining what he would do as president to put an end to foreigners sneaking into the country and deporting those who are in the country illegally.
Under my administration, anyone who illegally crosses the border will be detained until they are removed out of our country and back to the country from which they came. Block funding for sanctuary cities. We blocked the funding. No more funding.
South Florida is one of the most immigrant-rich areas of the country. Hard to put a definitive count on the number of people who live and work here without legal status. And then there are the kids called dreamers, brought to the U.S. by their parents. They have legal status by executive order from President Obama. Donald Trump said he would revoke that order on his first day in office.
So let's talk about it with our guest. Cheryl Little is a longtime advocate for dreamers and others who have problems with federal immigration authority. She is the head of the Americans for Immigrant Justice, which provides legal help to immigrants and lobbies in Washington for more humane immigration policies.
Denise Galvez is a marketer by profession who co-founded Latinas for Trump, a group that supports Donald Trump and his plans and policies. Juan Carlos Gomez is Director of Clinical Programs at the Carlos A. Costa Immigration and Human Rights Clinic at Florida International University. He is a veteran immigration lawyer and law professor. And we welcome everybody here. Thank you for coming in on the holiday.
Yeah, good morning.
Nice
Glad
to
to have
you
you here. Cheryl Little, you have been doing this for a long time,
Yes.
doing it well. I think that you are always ready for a good substantive discussion of immigration, the policies of this country. Did Donald Trump contribute to the discussion?
Well, if I can present a few facts. In terms of the border needs to be more secure, right now the border is more secure than it's ever been. In fact, in 2011, we had over 21,000 Border Patrol agents. Currently, we spend about $20 billion on border security, primarily in the Southwest region. Mm-hmm. That is as much as all other federal criminal law enforcement agencies combined, that budget is. In terms of, you know, I have heard from folks out there on immigration these days that immigrants are flooding into our borders. That's just not the case. In fact, that has been reduced over the years, and our current limit on immigration is about what it was in 1972.
Right,
and
well,
Mexicans,
yeah.
one last thing.
Yeah.
Mexicans have been going back to their country in greater numbers than they're arriving in our country.
Right. Well, I would say, I think the thrust of what Mr. Trump said on Wednesday night in Phoenix seemed to be, we are besieged by illegal immigrants, people who are in the country willfully breaking the law, and our government is doing nothing about it.
Well, there's a reason that President Obama has been called the deporter-in-chief. Yeah. Last time I checked, we had deported roughly 2.3 million immigrants.
During his 7.5 years.
Absolutely right.
You know, I'm not sure if anybody heard Denise laugh to my left here, but you laughed. Why? Because you are here. I just want to set up that you are here because it's very unusual in our part of the country to find a Latina who not only is supporting Donald Trump for president, but vocally out there promoting the policies. And because, you know, rightfully so for many Latinos who've heard his rhetoric and inflammatory words against them. So you laughed because
why? The point of his entire speech really, and the focus and the priority, and he says it over and over again, is criminal aliens, and people never make that distinction. They right away start talking about step number 10, you know, the dreamers, you know, the people that are here, you know, actually contributing, that are good people, that are good migrants, you know, like my parents were, who contribute to this country. But that's not where the focus lies. His entire speech, 9 out of the 10 things he talked about was enforcement. It was getting the criminals out first, okay? That's what he talked about. Then maybe the visa overstays, then the people who are abusing our system, our welfare system, which I know personally many, especially here in Miami, that happens a lot. Okay, there's a lot of Latin Americans doing that here now.
Yeah,
so that's where the focus
it's not
lies.
Maybe. We have an extensive system. As a matter of fact, we have an unfair system. Right now, we have an institutional hearing program where you have an individual who's serving out their time in state prison, and the Department of Homeland Security, in coordination with the Department of Justice, will put this person through removal proceedings before they even make it out. Tens of thousands of people are processed through this system. We already are addressing the issue. We have coordination between Department of Homeland Security, state, and local enforcement. The thing is that the conversation must not be one that promotes hatred, that does not thrive on ignorance. The problem that we have here is that we have a wall, and in the same way that in his speech he talks above and below ground, we have that. We have intelligence, but the thing is that, are we making laws? Are we promoting sort of fear in people? Because by putting on the parents of victims, it doesn't make sense. The logic does not make sense.
Well, let Denise respond to that. When you
Absolutely.
saw
I would love
the
to.
half dozen, or sure, he brought at least, I think, 6 or 7 mothers and one
Right.
father
Right.
of Americans who had been murdered by illegal immigrants. It was powerful. There's
Right.
no question about it. I don't think it was representative of the crimes committed by people
No, and I
who
don't
are
think
here.
I mean, to me, that wasn't the takeaway from that entire speech. I speak for those that are part of my group, okay? There's a large and growing number of Latinos who silently support Mr. Trump all over the country. They call me, they tell me their stories. A lot of them have gone through a lot to become legal citizens of this country and are very proud of it, and they support us. Their focus is America first, safety first, economy first, immigration third. Yes, immigration affects those other 2 points, but they're not focused on this deportation, this scare tactics, this fear, this ignorance that you're saying exists. None of us agree with that position at all. That's your perception, your sensitivity.
Because that's the speech. The speech did not discuss, for example, in the world of commercial immigration, we have major quirks in the law that we need to deal with.
Give us an example.
Okay,
Juan.
for example, one of the problems is that there are about 65,000 H-1B visas every year. Another 20,000 for Singapore and Chile, another 20,000 for graduates of U.S. colleges and such. You have people, companies, making business decisions on what amounts to a roulette, what amounts to like a lottery. You have a company that will speculate whether a professional position is going to be filled starting October 1st, and you'll have 100-some-odd thousand people apply for the 65,000. It doesn't make sense to only have this limited number of commercial visas when the economy is growing and we need these individuals to help us thrive.
Cheryl?
The other one,
Yeah,
Cheryl, if
sure.
I may, one quick second on that front. We control monetary policy through the Federal Reserve, right? We can't even get practical legislation through Congress when you had senators like Senator McCain and Senator Rubio supporting not law that everyone agreed to, but you can't even get practical legislation through that deals with, in part with enforcement and in part with commercial immigration.
If I could just add, in 2013, the Congressional Budget Office spoke about the contributions to the economy that undocumented immigrants make. And they said in 2013 that if we were to fix our broken immigration system over the next 10 years, the federal deficit would be reduced by $200 billion, that's with a B, dollars. And there was just a study this year, another government study that looked at taxes that undocumented immigrants pay. $12 billion in state and local taxes, and this was even surprising to me. Upwards of 3/4 of undocumented immigrants pay into the Social Security system.
Even though they get no benefits.
That's exactly right.
Can I
Upwards
just-
of $15 billion
I think I'm looking at the study that you're citing, and what I found really interesting too was that in 6 states, Florida being one of them, the most revenue from taxes paid by undocumented immigrants, and the highest percentage of paying versus salary and income is through undocumented immigrants.
Right, and that's why.
Right, but how many of those are on welfare? And
But
is it really balanced what they're
you're not
contributing
even
versus what they're
eligible for
taking?
welfare.
Look at the facts.
You're not eligible for welfare if you're undocumented.
That's exactly right. We have people who are legal, and they don't even want to take benefits that they're entitled to. But for the most part, you don't get benefits unless you're a U.S. citizen, with some exceptions. Listen, you know, passing a sensible, comprehensive immigration reform bill is not just the humane thing to do. It is the smart thing to do. Just look at the numbers when we're talking about the contributions that immigrants make to our economy.
But nobody's arguing that on behalf of Trump, at least. I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of, again, my group. I'm not a politician. I'm not an analyst. I'm not an immigration expert. I'm speaking on behalf of what he said, the substance of what he said. Those details that you're talking about, he hasn't even gone into. You're proposing things that he is not opposed to.
Yes, but that's the
just
thing.
because he didn't grant amnesty to every single illegal immigrant here doesn't mean that there may not come a point where, under his administration, that would happen.
You suggested that immigrants are a drain in our economy in a comment you made earlier, and my point is, no, they're not.
Can we talk about amnesty versus a plan for citizenship when we come back right after the break?
Yes.
On this Sunday morning, live in our studio, our guests are talking about immigration reform. And before we go forward, I want to put up a editorial from Friday's Wall Street Journal about Donald Trump's speech. Here's what the Journal had to say, if there it is. The Journal said, under the headline, Trump's Fortress America, Ronald Reagan described America as a city on a hill that people around the world aspire to reach. Donald Trump offered a different vision in his immigration speech Wednesday night. A fortress surrounded by a wall with guards and sensory detectors and police to hunt down and expel anyone who makes it past the barriers. Denise, that's the Wall Street Journal, the great conservative voice of this country editorially, and they didn't particularly care for the speech. They say that Trump's vision of where we are with immigration is just skewed. What do you say?
Again, I can only speak on behalf of the group that I represent and the Latinas in my group. And to us, we remain focused on that. We're okay with that kind of rhetoric because we think that America should be put first, and that, yes, we're still compassionate and we're fair, and there's certain category of illegal immigrants that we do need to have a plan for, and there's definitely a reform that needs to be put in place. But we're okay with that kind of talk because it's a different time than when Ronald Reagan took office for us. At least right now, we are more concerned with the security of our own citizens and our families, and we're also more concerned with the economy and how do we grow the jobs. And I know a lot of stats have been...
Right, and excuse me, and part of, frankly, what bothered me as I listened to that speech on Wednesday night, which he didn't deliver so much as shout at people. I mean, it was very aggressive and full of, in my view, vitriol. Was the tone of that speech acceptable to you?
I was not at all offended by it. I listened to it, just like everybody else did, and I waited after to see what kind of response I got from, the women who are in my group. And
what did they
none
say?
of them had, took it away. And I'm telling you, there's people in my group. I'm Cuban, so I have a very different experience than most of the people in my group. In my group, there are Latin Americans who have come from Mexico, from Bolivia, from Venezuela, from all these other different Latin American countries. They have experienced a very, very different pattern than I did with, obviously with my parents coming here because of political asylum. So it's very interesting to me to hear their perspective, and they were right on with him. They agreed with him 100%, didn't have a problem with his delivery. They agree with, what? They need to get in line, all those people. There are laws that have always existed. All he's talking about is enforcing the existing laws.
The laws don't make sense. Forgive me. Right now, if you're a U.S. citizen and you want to petition for your 21-year-old married son or daughter, and you have to wait because the visa line is from December of 2003 or 2004, does it really make sense? You have an immigration push factors and you have pull factors. You have crises in Central America. You have crises over the last few decades in the Caribbean, whether it's Haiti or Cuba, right? And the thing is, though, that president is responsible for reasonably leading the country. You have Ronald Reagan quoting St. Augustine on the concept of the city on the hill, and you have what Mr. Trump is saying, and the thing is though that this is a successful businessman. Why is he speaking this way?
But he's not saying anything that those people, he agrees that those lines are ridiculous for people trying to get in here legally. He agrees with that 100%. That's the whole point of putting this in place.
There could not be a more different policy and plan for path to citizenship between the two candidates. Cheryl, frame for us what is the difference between a path to citizenship for people who are here in an undocumented illegal manner and amnesty, which takes away the consequence for doing something wrong. Frame that difference.
Yeah, and amnesty has been such a dirty word over the past couple of decades. Listen, path to citizenship, if we look at the bipartisan Senate bill that passed.
2013.
2013. That was, you get to back of the line, you pay fines, you learn English, if you have any criminal history, you're going to be out of luck, and on and on and on and on. Okay, I think under the Senate bill in 2013, you wouldn't be able to earn citizenship until at least 13 years. This is not amnesty, okay? This is allowing people in our country who've lived here for years, worked hard, paid taxes, have U.S. citizenship, broken no criminal laws, to finally come out of the shadows and be a part of the America that I believe this country was when I immigrated here.
One of the examples, if I may, in terms of, for example, he mentions hiring more Border Patrol. Well, the idea is not to make the government bureaucracy grow. The idea is to give the effective resources to the people we have working with us right now. One of the problems is that government is sometimes driven by contracts and given by, for example, you'll have facilities that someone bids and someone comes up with this new great idea of like, oh, no, this is the new solution. No, we have an idea of what the pattern is. Since 1986, we've been dealing with millions of people at one number or another, whether it's, for example, President Reagan's amnesty or reform, if you prefer, dealt with agricultural workers and dealt with people who had been here since '81. It wasn't just an automatic thing. You had to take English classes if you had been here since '81. You had to pass an exam. You could not have certain history. Right now, you have Hondurans, Nicaraguans, Salvadorans. Nicaraguans and Hondurans who've had temporary protected status since 1998. They are in a limbo. How can you raise a child long distance? You can't.
Yeah.
But
That's exactly right.
And then also you have the situation with Dreamers, and I'm proud to say
Right.
somebody who works here in the studio right now is a young lady who is a dreamer, and what Donald Trump said Wednesday night is, my first hour in office, I'm revoking this executive order that allows these young people brought here as children or teenagers by their parents, they've only really known the United States. He says, I'm going to ship them all back to where they came from.
He didn't say that.
Yeah.
He didn't say that.
Well,
He said he's going to revoke all executive orders, period. He didn't
That's
identify the
that's
judge or
what it is.
anybody, but he didn't say he was going to deport them all either right away. I mean, you guys are putting words
They
into
have
his
no
speech.
remedy. This is the remedy. These children are in a limbo.
Exactly, and there's
they've
people,
done-
I have immigration attorneys on my group. One of them just spoke at one of my events. She has 10,000 clients who have been in a state of limbo for 8 years waiting for something. She
Deporting
says
them
no
is not the
status is
answer.
worse than
Something
just
about the
being here in
dreamers.
limbo.
Listen, we
Cheryl.
represent countless dreamers, okay? My phone is ringing off the hook from kids who are terrified that if Donald Trump is elected president at the end of January, and I mean, is in office the end of January, that they're about to be kicked out of this country.
Right, because that's what you guys are saying on TV
No,
and in the media
no,
and with
that's
all your
what
stats,
he's
and that's
saying.
not what he said.
The executive
he never
order
said
that
that.
is currently in place, that was put in place in 2010
Yes, we understand.
by Obama, Donald Trump has said he will rescind.
He will revoke
Okay,
it, but he
well,
did not
one
say
and
that
one
his
is
first
two.
priority
Well,
is
what's the effect of
after getting
rescinding?
rid of the
He said
criminals.
that it's the most important issue. And as I tell people who work for me, on the first day you answer the phone, you're going to write everything is urgent. Wait till you're seasoned and you will see that you have to prioritize. You have to discern between what is an intelligent thing, what is an emergency, and what is not, right?
And he
Actually,
did
he needs
to be
prioritize. He
seasoned.
did prioritize.
For
He
his
did for the
term.
right things.
Rudy Giuliani was on the Trump circuit, was on CNN this morning, and said that Donald Trump is moving away from the idea of mass deportations. Okay. It sounds like, it's hard to tell, frankly, where Donald Trump is between, on one day, a kinder, gentler Donald Trump spoke to the president of Mexico,
It's
and
still
hours
muddy.
later what Michael characterized as vitriolic speech.
Well,
but
Listen, I always say,
but it seems to be shifting and changing now as we are analyzing the speech.
the only thing he emphasized in that speech were the criminal aliens. That much is 100% accurate, and you could say that all day long on every news channel.
What
the
about
rest
detaining
is still
people? What
to
about
be
detaining
determined.
Many of the Hispanic leaders he had courted and met with felt that they had been duped.
Yes, 3
by Donald Trump.
left his advisory committee. 3
Nevertheless,
confirmed.
They had met with him. They had heard him, what they believed was softening his position. And when they heard the speech, they felt betrayed.
Because they wanted amnesty. I spoke on I was on CNBC with one of them, with Jacob, and that's exactly what he told me.
Secretary
We went back and
Chertoff.
forth.
Secretary Chertoff is not.
Can we
Secretary
keep him
Chertoff
alive?
calls him reckless.
I wish we had more time because we've only
You'll be
begun
back.
Keep him alive. The
this
majority
discussion.
of polls, show that most Americans are in favor of comprehensive immigration reform, including the majority of Democrats and Republicans.
Maybe come January, Congress will do something. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Great discussion.
After the break, take this and so much more to the Powerhouse Roundtable. Stay
Whoa,
with
we've
us.
got a lot.
What's that?
It is that time again, time to take a closer, more analytical look at the week's top news stories with our Powerhouse Roundtable.
Our favorite time of day, introductions come first. Nancy Ankrum is the editor of the editorial page at the Miami Herald and a regular here on the Roundtable. Sean Foreman is a professor of political science at Barry University who is a go-to source when it comes to analyzing elections and politics and government, etc. Roundtable regular Marlon Hill is an attorney with the Hamilton, Miller and Berthasell law firm, and he hosts a radio talk program on community issues. And
Great
big
to
into
have you all
elections.
here. Wonderful. And Marlon Hill, let me begin with you just by getting your take on that Wednesday night speech by Donald Trump. Did it sort of advance the discussion, or what did it do?
It's amazing when someone travels across the border, the type of demeanor you take on, right? So he goes to Mexico and takes on a total different personality. You know,
Wow,
He
right?
was presidential, I thought.
or wanting to seem,
restrained
to seem presidential, which I think is the key thing for his campaign. He's disrupting it. He has brought in new leadership. He's trying to appear to an audience, which I don't think he's trying to appeal, in my opinion, to Mexicans or other communities that he has undignified in my mind.
Although
Then
we
he
can
comes
talk
back,
about Detroit this weekend.
possibly, and he comes back across the border and has a total different demeanor, right? We know the type of red meat that he's trying to sell,
Right.
and a lot of people are seeing right through that, including myself.
Well, also we need to make clear that the president of Mexico, whose ratings are kind of in the crapper, can I say that?
Yes, you can.
Invited him because he thought it would make him look more presidential also.
Right.
There were two things going on. Two people trying to look presidential, each having their own challenges.
And you know what? The costs of the wall remained that sort of elusive subject when he came back, Sean Foreman. Did they talk about the wall? Did Donald Trump get the wall paid for? He says they talked. President of Mexico Nieto says no. I mean, what happened
May
there?
have been semantics there that they didn't discuss. The president of Mexico might have made a statement and Trump moved beyond it. But talk about comprehensive immigration reform. Trump has a 10-point plan. Really, a lot of things he's calling for are already the law of the land.
Right.
He's calling for tighter enforcement. But I think we're going to see that now he wants to get away from talking about immigration. Talk about the Supreme Court, Second Amendment, Obamacare, things that he has clearer positions on than this muddled immigration.
Right,
stance.
and something strategically, politically, that I'm kind of astounded that he hasn't talked about more was the FBI revelations this week in the email servers, the 17,000 emails they recovered.
It's not sexy enough, Michael. It's not sexy enough for his
it
base.
certainly is not playing well with the public. Her disapproval rating now 58-59%. And in fact, I thought that the things that they found out, just to cite one example, her original explanation of why she only had one device as Secretary of State because it was convenient in the private email server. It turns out she had 13 phones and 5 iPads, and when the FBI said, let's have them so we can see if they were hacked, they couldn't find any of the phones and 3 of the iPads.
Right. Hillary Clinton is not doing herself any favors during these episodes in terms of stepping up and really confronting them. The call for press conferences have gone, just unremarked. And she is letting her foes, her enemies, her opponents really define the narrative.
Absolutely,
here.
and I think Trump as well is using the optics of the media to get his base right, because he has really no ground game with regards to organizing a presidential campaign. She really, her campaign leadership really needs. They really need to unleash her, and as Nancy said, come to the media.
For the last week and a half or two, she's been in the Hamptons and Beverly Hills and Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, which is all very nice, raising money, but I think Trump, you know, whatever missteps he's made, he's been out there campaigning, and she has not.
Right, and Hillary Clinton says that there's a lot of smoke but no fire there with the emails and the Clinton Foundation and these allegations of pay to play. But the problem is when there's a lot of smoke, it attracts people to look. Right. And I'm sure if not Donald Trump, his surrogates are really going to hammer this over the next couple of weeks. It appears there's nothing illegal, but there's a lot of clumsiness and mistakes that the FBI director pointed out, that there's fodder there.
Well, that's what was so interesting about the Clinton camp, was framing this whole issue as, okay, this is, now you can see why the FBI decided not to press charges. And I think the general public is looking at that and saying, what? That because it's so distasteful, what seems to be the appearance of hiding, and then the emails were erased. It was found that the emails were erased after
the Congressional Committee was asking for the emails. They were erased after the request had been made.
She definitely has to do a better job of telling her narrative.
Exactly.
Right? 2 more months of this campaign, she really has to stop reacting and start writing her
own. Why not a press conference? Why would a campaign not put her up for a press conference?
Because she doesn't do very well. She just does not do very well. It's her personality. It is not a flaw in the large sense, in the small sense, but in the larger sense of a campaign, coming to the people, presenting yourself to the people. She does not make the connection. I, for one, don't think that you have to just love a candidate in order to really examine his or her policies and decide who's best for you.
Yeah,
we don't have to like her, Nancy.
Right.
We don't.
Exactly.
You know, so put her in before a press conference.
It's not a popularity contest. Sean, let me ask you, I don't want to get too inside baseball here, but this weekend, Hillary Clinton's Florida campaign opened its 52nd campaign office, and it was down in Little Haiti in Miami. And more power to her, and her campaign people are very well organized. Donald Trump has won in Sarasota. That's it. And yet he is only behind her in Florida in the polls by 2, 3, 4 points.
Right. Well, Donald Trump has benefited from free media. He's benefited from large social media gatherings. The previous guest you had on, she has a group, Latinas for Trump. She has thousands of followers on that, but I don't know if that translates into votes. And so it's absolutely imperative to have boots on the ground, to have people who are knocking doors and making phone calls. And we know that the Obama team was very good at this, and Clinton inherits a lot of this, so that puts him at a strategic disadvantage.
Yeah, it's really up to the Republican National Committee to do a lot of the legwork that a presidential campaign would do.
Michael, I learned a lot from the Florida primary. People really want change and to be disruptive, but they really are voting for folks where there's name recognition. Daphne Campbell, David Rivera, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. They say they want change, but they're going, so name recognition is key. So Donald is really using the media to drive his name recognition. And at the end of the day, the last turnout was 72%. Right, the primary, as you said, was only 20%.
People voted.
For presidential election was 72%, but the primary was 20%.
Primary was
and Broward had the lowest in the state. That's not going to cut
Hillary
it.
Clinton is not going to win Florida November 8th if she doesn't get a huge turnout in Broward, which has the most registered Democrats in the state of Florida.
Yeah. Time to take a quick break. We got a lot more to talk about. All right, stay with us.
It is roundtable time, and we are here with our old friend Marlon Hill, Miami attorney, Nancy Ankrum, editor of the editorial page of the Herald, and Sean Foreman. And Sean, let's talk a little bit about the Senate race. Marco Rubio easily won the GOP Senate nomination and immediately said to Patrick Murphy, the Democratic nominee, let's have 6 debates. And what Patrick Murphy, in my view, should have said is, let's go, where and when. And instead he said something to the effect of, I'll do 6 debates when you agree to serve as 6-year senator.
Yes. Well, I think that's an issue that Rubio has to finally deal with, is can he commit to a full term or not? And it sounds like he's not, and that's something voters seriously have to consider. But you're right, Murphy is not well known outside of South Florida. He doesn't have a lot of experience. He doesn't have the experience debating, and there are questions about his depth on a number of issues, and so he absolutely needs to take advantage and get national media coverage for standing on stage with Marco Rubio.
Right.
Yeah, but the vote.
We were very disappointed when Patrick Murphy kind of wiggled out of having a debate with Alan Grayson, using a very weak excuse about domestic violence allegations.
Yeah.
And I was looking for the nexus, and I thought, oh, the nexus is he doesn't want to do this. He can't run from a debate. He does not have any kind of depth of experience, even though he is an elected representative.
2 terms.
Yeah, and he needs to hone those chops and also show us who he is.
Well, he asked the voters to elect him in the primary after beating out, Pam Keith did very well in double digits as well. He needs to step up his game. This is now the showtime, right, for the next couple months. So whether it's 6 debates, 4 debates, 2 debates, he better get preparation.
Sean, how difficult is it going to be for Patrick Murphy to get up in front of the public and face questions about the fact that he, some say embellished, some say flat out lied about his professional experience, about his credentials? I mean, that's when you're stepping up and running for senator, that's going to be something that he really is going to have to explain somehow.
Well, there you go. He's running for senator. So, of course, he's embellished his background, right, to play at that level. But, I think voters are certainly paying attention to the presidential race. They're set there, but the Senate race and the mayor's race, we get to that, these are areas where the candidates have room to grow, and you have to define yourself before the opposition defines you. And so Patrick Murphy needs to be aggressive, take responsibility for what he said in the past, and make the case why he has the gravitas to be a U.S. senator.
Exactly.
And one of the keys is also going to be, will they benefit or be hurt on the down ballot? Trump, Clinton, Murphy, Clinton, Rubio,
well, and
Trump.
that's a question we will discover soon, is will Marco Rubio even appear at a rally with Donald Trump, much less campaign for him? I'm just being present, in a sense, well, he's already endorsed him, but very lukewarm.
Don't count on it.
Let's move on to the Miami-Dade mayor's race. Nancy, Carlos Jimenez came close, but no cigar.
No cigar.
48%. He needed 50 plus 1.
Right.
So Raquel Regalado gets a fresh start.
Right, absolutely. And she, too, probably needs to redefine herself, sharpen her focus, be less combative about everything's wrong, everything's wrong, everything's wrong, and talk about her vision and talk about why she says people are ready for change. And she has, I think it's going to be a matter also of who gets to Alfredo Santamaria's and Frederick Bryant's people first. I think that their pull was underestimated, clearly. Clearly, Mayor Jimenez was surprised.
He was.
And, that kept him from reaching the 50.1.
I think Mayor Jimenez's managerial chops are on question. Now we're going to see whether his retail politics can really come into play. He's going to, both candidates are Cuban American, right? So they're going to be fighting it out in, Mayor Regalado's territory on radio.
Which I believe demographically, Mayor Jimenez won in the primary. Is that
Not
right?
by much, though. Not by much. One of the key questions: can they even articulate an agenda for the Black community? That's going to be over 22%.
Right. Well, this Frederick, anybody who's watching and doesn't know, Frederick Bryant is a retired school teacher who spent $3,000 and got 9% of the vote.
Right.
Sean, how'd that happen?
Well, I think that's what the Jimenez people want to know. It fell under the radar. I'm not quite sure what he did, other than he might have been the guy who showed up at all the local events and made that. But and both Regalado and Jimenez are Republicans. There's an issue of whether they'll get closer to Hillary Clinton or not. Both of them have said they won't vote for Trump. But the electorate is going to be much different. 267,000 people voted in Miami-Dade County this week. They're going to be close to 900,000, more than 3 times the voters, many more Democrats, more younger people, and people who haven't been paying attention to the mayoral race so far.
Right. Well, very hard for either Regalado or Jimenez between now and the next couple of weeks to say, okay, I'm endorsing Hillary Clinton, because it would look kind of bald-faced politics of the worst kind.
It'll look like pandering. It'll look like pandering.
Gee, that never happens.
Never, ever.
Well, maybe Mayor Jimenez should call Raquel and say, let's do 6 debates.
Right.
Well, we have issued an invitation, and all to her great credit, Raquel said, sure, I'll come back on This Week in South Florida. So we expect to have them here, and as far as I'm concerned, the more the better.
They should actually have them within the communities. Florida City, Doral, Miami Gardens.
Right.
That's a very good idea. You know, in the short time we have left, if you look at the little banner at the bottom of your screen, you'll see we would really like to talk a little bit about the first confirmed Zika mosquito samples found where? In 339 or 40 on Miami Beach.
Miami Beach.
I'm thinking that I have to get rid of my bromeliads in front of the house.
You should. Well, if you live on the beach, you should. But here's my question about that. How tens of thousands, Nancy, you know, we've been covering this, tens of thousands of samples, and 1 or 2 or 3 have come back positive, leading many people who are skeptical like we are to say, really? What is wrong with what's happening in the testing process and sequence here?
Right, exactly. And not only that, getting pregnant women or women who want to be get pregnant tested has been a far greater challenge than any other adult, male or female. And that too is something that, you know, is a challenge that really needs to be rectified.
Yeah, the Miami Herald, I think it was Daniel Chang, had an excellent piece, I think, in Saturday's paper about how young women in their 20s and 30s who may not have been bitten but want to get tested, that they have to go to a doctor, they have to have a doctor's prescription. It could cost them $500. It is much harder to do this than it should be.
Exactly. And, you know, it goes all the way up. Blame goes all the way up to Congress, which has just punted on approving funding for this.
Well, they should have enough rest after Labor Day to get to the job.
Well, they go back on Tuesday, so Sean, do you think, in fact, there is a chance that first thing they get back, they may pass a Zika funding bill?
There's a chance. Let's hope so. Congress has to pass the entire federal budget, which is 13 different appropriations bills in the next 3 weeks. That's a pretty big push. They probably will do it just until November and then have to deal with it again next year. You know, the problem is there's a poll in the Herald today of Kaiser Foundation. About half the country says they wouldn't come to Miami or Miami Beach because of Zika. So we need to get in front of this. The good news is our representatives and senators are united.
They're all together.
Hopefully they can make a difference.
Exactly.
All right, that's going to be the final word. Thank you all for coming in.
Thank
Great
you.
round table.
Thank you so much.
Really loved doing this with you.
Yeah.
All right, coming up after the break, new developments out of Hallandale Beach in the wake of a scathing Local 10 investigation.
The question of alleged corruption and collusion between Hallandale Beach's vice mayor and a developer is now in the hands of the state attorney.
This week there was a formal call to have Commissioner Bill Julian of Hallandale Beach suspended. Here's Todd Tongan to bring us up to date.
The governor can and should suspend Bill Julian. Malfeasance, neglect of duty, and incompetence.
On Wednesday, just before a contentious Hallandale Beach City Commission meeting, Commissioner Keith London revealed a letter he wrote to Governor Rick Scott regarding alleged admissions Vice Mayor Bill Julian made on an answering machine. Local 10 investigative reporter Bob Norman first brought this to light.
What they don't know is they're buying the food bank a freaking van that I couldn't tell everybody. Or Chesky told me, don't worry, before this, don't worry, we'll have 300 people out in the street for you when you run for office. I want to see that.
London says the tape clearly illustrates a major political corruption scandal surrounding Commissioner Julian.
Soliciting a bribe, accepting a bribe, and trading his vote for campaign contributions.
When London wanted to discuss it during the meeting, it was dismissed as a point of order, and the meeting run by Mayor Joy Cooper, who is one of Julian's allies, devolved into a name-calling session.
Commissioner London's under investigation as well with the OIG. So, wait, please don't interrupt. Commissioner London's not under investigation. Commissioner, you're interrupting. Please let me not under investigation. Yes, he is.
Because everybody's trying to accuse everybody. Everybody now, it's like with a laughing stock.
Meanwhile, Julian seemed to be the only commissioner with nothing to say.
It's an allegation, and, you know, It's an investigation, so.
Anything you want to say to your constituents?
Not at this time.
And so after all of that, there will now be a discussion about the alleged bribery scandal surrounding Commissioner Bill Julian on Wednesday, September 7th at 6:30 p.m. But if you would like to speak before the commission in that public forum, you will need to sign up. In Hallandale Beach, Todd Tong in Local 10 News.
And Governor Scott's spokesperson told the Sun-Sentinel that he is reviewing the issue and the request to suspend Julian.
All right, still to come, my personal perspective about the state of the presidential race. Not good.
If you were in Key West right now, here is what you would see, brought to you by our Key West cam.
It is beautiful down there, and now here is our Weather Authority meteorologist, Jennifer Correa, the professional who has our Sunday forecast. Jennifer.
Good afternoon, Glenna and Michael. Yes, absolutely gorgeous out of the Ocean Key Resort cam, and then out of Miami's Tower cam. Also beautiful with a few of those cumulus clouds moving in. That's associated with the sea breeze trying to push inland. Temperatures are in the upper 80s, but look what it feels like out there for at least southern Miami-Dade County, even in southwest of the county, in the triple digits, including all the way down to Key West. Elsewhere, it feels more like 98 or 99 degrees. But you know what? What's the difference? Because it feels hot out there now. The winds are coming in out of the east at 10 miles per hour, up at 12 miles per hour in Key West and in Marathon. For the rest of today, there's still that 30% chance for an inland shower and thunderstorm. Highs getting to 91 degrees. That's the actual high. 90 for tomorrow. Enjoy your Labor Day Monday. Michael.
Jennifer, thanks. All right, before we leave you this morning, a personal perspective about the presidential race. It's awful, abysmal, depressing, and I'm afraid it's not going to get any better. Traditionally, presidential campaigns begin right after Labor Day. Well, forget it. It's been underway for about a year, due largely to Donald Trump. This week, Trump went to Mexico to meet with President Enrique Peña Nieto. They didn't accomplish much, but Trump got to stand alongside Peña at a matching podium at a news conference, and so he got to look presidential, and he was on his best behavior. But not for long, Trump came back to Arizona and gave a mean-spirited speech on immigration. Trump seems to think our country is under siege from without and within by foreigners who don't share our values and break the law with impunity. Now, that doesn't jibe with my experience living in South Florida for nearly 4 decades. Yes, we lived through the crime wave from the Mariel boat lift, but aside from that, I have found the vast majority of our immigrants, they want what we native-born Americans want: a nice home, a good job, great schools for the kids, a safe neighborhood, and the right to be left alone by our government. Donald Trump has a siege mentality, and that is at odds with our history and our values. The fact is, immigration and customs enforcement this past year picked up fewer people trying to cross into the U.S. than they have in 40 years. And the Obama administration deported 235,000 people last year. To hear Trump tell it, they didn't deport anyone. Hillary Clinton also had a bad week. The FBI released a batch of emails they recovered from her private server. It certainly looks like she has not come clean with the American people. Her favorite phrase in her FBI interview was, "I don't recall." And remember her original explanation that she used private email and had just one smartphone because it was convenient? Well, it turns out she had 13 mobile devices and 5 iPads, and when the FBI asked for them to see if they had been hacked, the Clinton people couldn't even find any phone and just 3 iPads, please. So her negative ratings are now at an all-time high, 59%. Trump's negatives at 60%. You have to ask yourself, in a nation of 320 million people, is this the best we can do? Unfortunately, this year, it is. That's my perspective. Have a great Labor Day. Remember, as always, stay informed, get involved.
And get on the internet and find us. We love to hear from you. Have a great Sunday and a great Labor Day holiday.